Right now you have a lot of technical information about FFT. You've watched a lot of videos, you've seen examples of real live sessions, and you can get a sense after watching all of that about what's involved. In many ways, FFT is the simplest complex therapeutic model there is. On one side, it's only got three phases. Those three phases have goals, they have objectives, there are change mechanisms we can identify and support in research for each of those. So, in an interesting way, it's very simple. On the other hand, the actual practice of FFT can be very complicated. And it's complicated because it involves much more than just knowing the theory. It also involves being able to take the theory and move it into practice, actually in a relationship, in a discussion, in a conversation with the youth and their family, to be able to, on one side, be empathetic, be understanding, be both supportive and active in helping make them comfortable and help make the session go well. And on the other hand, have a voice in your head that keeps you on target so that you have purposeful sessions that are directed in specific ways that match the model. One of the biggest early challenges in learning FFT or any model are really the very simple things. When you're first starting and you haven't done a session yet, knowing how to get started can be complicated and a little overwhelming. It is that translation process between all that you've learned in the theory to put it into actual practice, behaviors and attitudes that you have to be able to do as you're talking to the family. There's three really big things. We're going to suggest that you actually begin getting ready for your session before it occurs in a phase we'll call planning for the session. There you can already begin to think about, based on the referral information, you can think about what might be most important to do, what you might want to talk about, and how you might want to go about approaching the family. You can come up with different ideas about what challenges may occur as well. Secondly, you've got to conduct the session. And in the session, there are some guidelines we have about how to be kind of in two different worlds at the same time. One world is an active participant in the discussion, where you're supportive and active. The second role is to be thinking and monitoring and following what's going on, looking for opportunities about where to highlight, where to intervene in order to help therapy move forward by achieving the goals of that particular phase. And then thirdly, after you're done, there's a very important phase in doing FFT, which is about reflecting and thinking about what went on and getting ready for the next session. Because in FFT, sessions layer on one another. They're not independent from one another. The key to being successful in any kind of psychological practice is not just knowing things, but it's being able to take what you know and put that knowledge into practice. In the next series of lessons, let's focus on three things that will help you with that. First, how to plan for the session. Remember, in FFT, sessions actually begin before you have them. You think through what your goals are. You make those goals consistent with the phase that you're in. You try to think about how the family will present when they come in and how you might respond to that presentation in order to be able to get a good quick start and make your time really effective when you work with the family and helping them pursue those goals. Secondly, there's the actual conducting of the session, what to focus on, how to keep your head above the water, so to speak, and keep your head focused on the core process and relational issues rather than get caught up in the content. And then third, after the session is an important time in terms of clinical decision making, because that's the time that you're able to stop, reflect for a moment, think back about what happened in the session, and put that knowledge through the lens of FFT. FFT actually begins before you enter into the session. FFT begins with you, and FFT begins with how you think about your work. It's important to remember that the families that we deal with have lives that are very complicated. Just like your lives and just like my life, family lives are inherently complicated. There's a lot to do. There's a lot of things to manage. There are a lot of things that come up because of the number of people, because of the number of issues involved. And these are things that families have to deal with every single day. In addition, by the time they come to you, when they complain or talk about issues and problems in the family, those issues and problems have a significant amount of so-called water under the bridge, meaning a lot has happened in terms of those behaviors. They're a bit like the tip of an iceberg in terms of the fact that when someone may speak about a school problem, for example, there's quite a history that's gone on around that. Probably very, very difficult for them to express when families come to you because of the complexity of their life, all the things that they've struggled with and the losses they've experienced. It's probably very difficult to succinctly tell you about the difficult and challenging behaviors that have gone on. And they probably exhibit a great deal of uncertainty about what's going to come next. Both what's going to come next from you and what's going to come next from court, placement decisions, and other things like that. Remember, these decisions are basically out of their control, so it's very complicated and very scary for families. What this all leads to is the fact that when families exhibit behavior either in sessions or they exhibit behavior during their daily activities, that there is a lot behind that behavior. And that's where FFT really begins to work differently than other models. It isn't just the behavior, it's the meaning. It's the way in which that behavior is linked to a pattern, and it's a way and the implications that has for the relational functions and the core attachments in the family that's really important. So remember, the goal here is to see behind the behavior, to see the intention, to see the meaning that's placed on it, because those are the places where we can have impact. Now, thinking differently about problems is on us. What that means is that we have to not just see what's in front of us, but as we talked about earlier, we want to make sure that we don't judge the book by the cover. And instead, we look at all the different chapters that go into helping explain what's below the surface of that iceberg. You have to also think differently about your work in another way. You know, what you're really working on is how they work together. And your primary focus is on the relational patterns and the relational nature of what goes on between them. And, you know, if we focus on how they work together, we're able to be very, very successful because, in a sense, they've come to you because they're stuck. And they're stuck because they've used all the solutions that make sense to them and they don't know where to go at this point. So helping them get unstuck is really what we're doing. Our focus is on what's happening between the family members in the present. Now, that's an important thing to do, that our job is not to go back and rehash and talk about old things, but to talk about how old things may impact how they feel, what they think, and the meaning they place on things today. We have to think differently about our work because our job is to help them work together. It isn't to fix the problems they experience, but to help get them unstuck so that they have the capability of doing it themselves. So while it may be a longer road to a solution, it's always best in FFT to help the family do it rather than to do it for them. Remember, this is all about what the family needs. So what's important is what they can't do right now is find a way out of their stuckness. What's important to remember is they could use help with their discouragement and the lack of motivation they have. Remember, what they need from you in this first session is a reason to take part in treatment. They need to feel like the help that they're getting fits them. They need practical tools that will actually help them do something. And some things they know that they need, other things they only want the outcome of. Here's what I mean by that. Families are unlikely to come to FFT and say to you, please engage and motivate me and my family so that we can help learn new skills and generalize those. Instead, they're going to come with a particular content problem and they're going to ask for help because at the end of the day, they want to feel better. And so they're not going to ask for engagement and motivation. That's what FFT brings to the table to help them move along. They need to be able to remain themselves while at the same time feeling empowered to handle their problems more effectively. At the end of the day, that's the best we can do for a family, is to help them be them, yet feel capable and self-sufficient. Typically, sessions are conducted with all the key family members. And key is defined as anybody who can support, sabotage, get in the way, or plays a central role in the success of treatment. The sessions are all focused and purposeful discussions. That means you're planned for each one. Sessions take an hour to an hour and a half. They have a purpose. Sessions follow a plan. Sessions are contingent. So that plan is likely to always be followed. What I mean by contingent is the way you follow it and the way you adjust that plan will change based upon what you're faced with, not the plan itself. In order to build engagement and momentum, it's important for 3 sessions in the first 10 calendar days at least, maybe more often depending. Sessions can be more frequent as risk goes up, and specific to the reframes, themes, and the skills required to match the developmental status of the family.